Right, this video today is a little bit out of line with most of my other videos because obviously in a channel called Sane German, most of the videos are about German. This is basically my love letter to the Afrikaans language. Okay, why do I find it necessary to write a love letter to the Afrikaans language? Simply because as a teacher, and also for many years a teacher in the school system, I have again and again teaching mostly English-speaking kids. I've heard this hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times. They all hate Afrikaans with a passion because they say, quote unquote, it's a dead language. They don't speak it. It's dead. Nobody speaks it. Well, 7 million people speak it, another 10 as a primary language and 10 more speak it as a secondary language. So, but they don't speak it. Fair enough. That it's a very simple language. You can't express yourself artistically in it, right? There's great German poetry, French poetry, English poetry, but Afrikaans, obviously, what are you going to do? It's so simple. Yes, it's simple. It's got a simple grammar. Fantastic. But you can't, because it's simple, you can't do anything with it. Now, okay, so I want to address that because I absolutely adore Afrikaans. I think it's the best language on the planet. Well, I obviously don't know every language, but certainly the ones that I do know and speak. I'm fluent in English, German, Afrikaans, a little bit in Spanish because I was married for 17 years to a Spanish lady, and a little bit of university French, not so great, and I've dipped into, when I was living in the Far East, into Thai and into Mandarin Chinese, whatever. So I've come across quite a few languages, and I absolutely love Afrikaans for the simple reason that it is the most elegantly simple constructed language that simply constructed language I've ever come across. There doesn't seem to be, to my eye, anything in there that is wasted. It's lean. It's like a long distance athlete with no body fat, or just about no fat on them, right? And the argument, and above all, this argument that comes up again and again, that you can't do something artistic with the Afrikaans language is such nonsense, because I kind of like poetry, German poetry, English poetry, but you look at Afrikaans poetry. One of my favorite poets is Eugene Marais. You read his Winternag or you read Skoppensboer, and it is as beautiful, as artistic, and as beautiful as any German, as Shakespeare, as Goethe, as Rilke, as whatever. Right? So people who say that you can't make great art with Afrikaans language, they just don't know what they're talking about. End of story. But I suppose also just to explain, to a little bit of background, one of the problems that most people have, I think, with Afrikaans is that they just don't have the opportunity to speak it. Right? If you're a school kid and you have to do Afrikaans classes at school, and your school teacher, like my beloved Mevrou Smith, says to you, well, go home and read Huisgenoot. Okay, so you're a teenage boy trying to read Huisgenoot. It's not ideal, right? I had the incredible fortune, and was complete coincidence, that at the age of 12, I started working at the cable station at the bottom of Table Mountain for about 4 years, and that all the people that were working there, the managerial people, were all Afrikaans, van der Merwe, van Vlaanderen, Beatre, and so on and so on. And the staff were all Cape Flats, right? So I learned Save Afrikaans, and I also learned the street Afrikaans. Jy traai my sleg uit, jy sal my vind, jy soek vir my, jy vind vir my. Jy's 'n mampada, jy's 'n hongie, jy. I also learned that version. So my Afrikaans every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and every day of my school holidays. So in other words, every day that I wasn't in school, basically, I was talking Afrikaans all day long, right? Which gave me, an advantage over the poor kids that are in the English-speaking schools. They have no Afrikaans friends. They don't want to read the Huisgenoot, if the Huisgenoot even still exists. I have no idea. So they don't have the exposure that I had. I had the exposure, and I started appreciating it because I saw the difference in terms of the grammar of Afrikaans to the grammar of German. And it's like, the thing night and day is a good way of putting it. It's night and day. And on top of it, I mean, yes, there are German poets like, let's say, Goethe in Zauberlehrling, Walle, das ist Walle, whatever, Wasser fließe und sich ergieße, whatever. He manages to use the German language in such a way that it sounds beautiful. It sounds like the water he's describing, right? That's something, that's, something, because usually German, what was it that Emperor Charles V of Spain or something said something really nasty to the effect that he uses French at court, Spanish to speak to his people, and German to give commands to his horse. I think that was what he said. So, German isn't exactly regarded as a melodious language, is what it is, right? Whereas French, for example, you can write a grocery list, a shopping list in French, and it sounds like a love poem, right? Portuguese, I stayed for a couple of months researching my first book on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I stayed in Rio de Janeiro. The Portuguese that's spoken there is very, very melodious, it flows beautifully. And Afrikaans does that as well. The sound of Afrikaans, if you hear somebody speaking good Afrikaans, it's beautiful, it flows, it's really special. So and then of course also love letter, because ultimately, if I had not had Afrikaans, I would have not conceived of the survival German idea. I sort of asked myself when I've been telling my school kids for 10 years now, one of my favorite fantasies was I have a time machine. I go back 200 years to whatever conference the professors had at Heidelberg, where they said, right, today we formalize the German language. And I walk in there and I throw Afrikaans grammar book on the table, and I say, I'm from the future, and you guys are going to structure the language according to that grammar. So that's been my fantasy for years going, I've jokingly told this to kids. Knowing obviously, impossible. And then a couple of months ago, when I kept on hearing about the problems that Germany is having with migrants struggling to learn German, which I found out then also, by the way, is the law states that, yes, you have free courses in German language for migrants, where you have people from all different cultures sitting in one classroom, 24 of them, different age groups, different educational backgrounds. Some have done 2 years worth of schooling. Some of them are qualified medical doctors from their country of origin. But here's the kicker. German is taught only in German. So you have people who perhaps, like, for example, in the English language, you struggle with this whole dative accusative nonsense, because you don't have that in English at all, or in Afrikaans for that matter. So it's a concept that it's completely novel. Now you're coming in there and you're learning the language and you're struggling with the language, and they take really difficult concepts which don't exist in your language and they explain them only in German. And then they are surprised when they don't get such a high percentage of actual learners that manage to learn this. Anyway, my point here, if it hadn't been for Afrikaans and my knowledge of Afrikaans, I would never have had the idea, hold on a moment, here's another Germanic language, West Germanic language, because you've got German, you've got Dutch, you've got Afrikaans, Flemish, right? Here's another West Germanic language, which has the opposite kind of idea for its grammar. In other words, elegant simplicity. You only use what you absolutely need to use. Why don't you just take this and you take the German vocabulary and you put the two together? What would happen if you did that? Half the things in the world where people come up with something is when they say something like, what if I did this? Right? That's how things happen. Because initially, when I did this, I thought to myself, there's got to be something wrong with this, because I checked on AI, this is an original idea. Nobody's tried this before. And I'm going, it's impossible. These days, there cannot be an original idea. Everybody's done everything before. So why doesn't this? And in the end, I came to it that if you don't know Afrikaans, you can't even get to this idea. You can't get to this idea and go, well, why don't we make German more like English? Or why don't we make German more like French or whatever? You can't. That doesn't work. It really only works if you know Afrikaans and you say, well, there. Which means that I had this idea, and potentially a bunch of other German teachers in South Africa who were also Afrikaans speaking could have had this idea. But teachers are usually very they have a more conservative tendency. In other words, they stick with the rules and everything. They're not many of them are not very rebellious or individualistic. I'm extremely individualistic and rebellious. Anyway, enough of that. But basically, if I didn't have Afrikaans, I wouldn't have come up with this concept. So there's a big thank you right there. And then even bigger thing, as I said, is Afrikaans gets a bad rap from everybody or nearly everybody. And it shouldn't, because it is a beautiful sounding language. It has great poetry, great literature. And and it was designed in the most brilliant possible way. So I just wanted to basically write a little love letter to the Afrikaans language. That's it. Baie dankie vir alles. Tot ziens.